Hi, this is the voice, Michael Chavello. You're listening to the Premium Oddscast, hosted by leading MMA odds maker Nick Kalikas, fight scientist and author of Fightnomics Reed Kuhn, and MMA journalist Brian Heminger. The absolute best UFC betting info, hits, statistics, and analysis from the most respected authority in mixed martial arts betting, MMAoddsbreaker.com.
Welcome to the Premium Oddscast, presented by 5 Dimes and Countermove, your home for fantasy MMA. I'm Brian Heminger, joined today by leading mixed martial arts odds maker Nick Kalikas to break down this Saturday's UFC Fight Night 68 event, which takes place in New Orleans, Louisiana. If you're unfamiliar with our format, myself and Nick will be breaking down the fight card from top to bottom, providing extensive analysis and a pick for each fight after doing our film study for the event. Then, fight scientist Reed Kuhn will step in and offer his expansive numerical insight on all bouts with sufficient data. Today, Reed will be able to contribute on 5 total bouts. Briefly looking back at our last event, our premium package bets for UFC Fight Night 67 went 1-2 to lose 2 units overall. We won our play on Alex Oliveira, but lost our underdog bets on Wilson Hayes and Damon Jackson. Our free bet on the Bektik Martins under 2.5 rounds total at plus 127 for 1 unit also won. Back to the present, UFC Fight Night 68 features a 12-fight card in total and will be aired on Fox Sports 1 and UFC Fight Pass this Saturday night. Let's dive right in. Now kicking off the preliminary card is a bantamweight contest between Jose Quinones, who is 3-2, taking on Leonardo Morales, who is 4-1. Now Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Morales minus 245 to come back on Quinones plus 175, and the line has dropped a little bit. It's minus 185 from Morales now. The comeback on Quinones is plus 160, so about a 15-cent drop on the dog. Line margins have tightened up a little bit as well. All lines, by the way, are courtesy of our sponsor as usual, 5dimes.eu, so make sure you guys check those out. And as far as the matchup goes here, these guys are very talented fighters, honestly. Guys that are young enough, and we're going to see a lot of improvements from them. They're Ultimate Fighter, obviously, veterans. They've both made the finals of Tough Latin America. Quinones in the bantamweight division, of course, and Morales made the finals of the featherweight division. So Morales is dropping down to bantamweight. Both of them, I should say, did not have success in the finals like they'd like to, but still making it to that point. I know the field was overall considered weak, but these are definitely two guys that could make a run and at bantamweight here if they get, keep on improving their overall skill sets a little bit more, and just getting that confidence, getting the right training, which they seem to be doing as well. So this should be a doozy. This should be a good fight. And getting back to this fight with Morales dropping down to 135, I think the bantamweight division is going to be better for Morales because obviously, the guy has really shown some outstanding skill on the feet. The guy has really strong punches, amazing kicking game. He's more than capable of knocking people out with his hands or his feet. He's got good fight IQ, good cardio to go along with it. He is a southpaw. So he has a lot of advantages over most when in the stand-up game, the striking game. Now he has to worry about and still improve a little bit more on his grappling and on his takedown defense a little bit and kind of develop in that area to complete his overall game and to be a little bit more of a threat. But I think at 135, with him making the drop, that's going to be a little bit better. I think his takedown defense is going to be better suited for him at 135 as well. And again, he's been drilling that. So Morales is a very talented fighter, exciting guy to watch. And I think it's a high upside for him, especially considering he's only 22 years old. Now, Quinones, on the other hand, he's another guy that I really think, at age 24, he's going to continue to improve as well. Quinones is a very well-rounded fighter. I think he's actually more well-rounded than Morales at this point because Quinones is capable of, again, doing some damage on the feet. He's got a little bit of power to go along with it. I think Morales has him as far as technical striking goes, but Quinones has enough power to do some damage along the way. One thing that bothers me about Quinones, though, is his defense. His strike defense is not the greatest. He does get tagged a little bit. He has been knocked out in the past, and that is a little bit of a concern because you don't want to see him take too much punishment, especially in this fight against Morales, which Morales is capable of knocking most out. So in this fight, you don't want to have questionable strike defense, no doubt about it. But Quinones, his best attribute, I think, is his ability to mix things up well and get the fight to the ground and use some heavy ground and pound. He is impressive. When he gets in top position, the guy can drop some bombs, and he's pretty confident, and he's pretty good at controlling the tempo on the ground as well. So Quinones, is going to be a tough out for Morales, but I think Morales is going to be able to do enough to basically keep this fight upright for the most part and outstrike Quinones. Now, of course, if not, I mean, if Morales gets put on his back, then it's going to obviously favor Quinones en route to a decision win here. But Morales can keep things standing for the most part. I think his just technical striking ability and his ability to land a little bit cleaner on Quinones is going to come into play here. So I'm expecting this fight to probably hit the scorecards because both these guys are tough and both of them are hard to stop. I think for sure if there is a finish here, I honestly think it's probably going to be Morales finishing Quinones because I think, again, with that defense of lacking of defense, I should say, with Quinones, I think that's what's going to come into play here. But if the fight hits the scorecards, it should be close. It should be competitive, and you can make a case for Quinones here as well. But I still think that Morales should be able to do enough, even if it does hit the cards, to probably outpoint Quinones. But it should be a very competitive fight. So my official pick will be Morales beating Quinones, either by decision or by possible knockout along the way. And I am looking forward to seeing these guys progress their careers and improve along the way as well.
I actually expect this fight to be pretty close despite the current odds. Morales will definitely be the better striker in my opinion. He has a really diverse striking attack with some great kicks, very powerful kicks. He can go to the head, the body, the legs with them, and he could finish the fight with any of those in my opinion. I think if the fight does get finished, it's probably going to be Morales with stand-up strikes. But the problem with Morales is I do think he's a bit of a one-trick pony. He is not very good in terms of the grappling department yet. That's something he still needs to add to his game. And Quinones could take advantage. Like, Quinones is not, an all-American wrestler by any stretch of the imagination, but he does have a decent ground game. He looks for takedowns. He had 3 attempts in his first UFC fight for that tough final, and I expect him to be looking for the takedown here against Morales, because while Quinones is decent on the feet, he's respectable, he has some power, he's going to have to use that full well-roundedness of his game if he wants to win this fight, and I expect him to do it. He's going to be looking to make this fight enter the clinch, he's going to be looking to take this fight to the ground, get top position, and if he does, I think Morales could be in a bit of trouble. Yair Rodriguez was able to get Morales on his back, and granted that was at featherweight and Morales is dropping down to bantamweight, but there's a really good chance here that Quinones could drag this fight to the ground and start taking advantage of the Nicaraguan's lack of ground game. So I think Morales will control the pace of the fight on the feet, but I expect Quinones to actually drag this fight to the ground, and he could walk away with 2 out of 3 rounds. So I'm actually going to pick Jose Quinones to pull off the upset. Now moving up to the middleweight division, we have Ricardo Abreu, who is 5-1, taking on Jake Collier, who is 8-2. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
I open Abreu minus 210, the comeback on Collier plus 160. Right now, over at 5 dimes, it's Abreu minus 200, the comeback on Collier is plus 170. So not a ton of action coming in. The line margins have tightened up a little bit. And it is a difficult fight to pick. I mean, both these guys have talent, have a lot of potential, but they haven't really quite lived up to it yet. I guess I'll start with Abreu first. The guy's a tough Brazil 3 vet. He lost in the semifinals by split decision, so almost won the whole thing. He has a BJJ background. He has a lot of hype coming into MMA, actually, from his high-level black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's accomplished a lot in that area. He's still raw in MMA, but he definitely has a lot of potential. The guy is a powerful guy for the weight class, no doubt about it. So his striking, I mean, you can't underestimate it. The guy can land that knockout punch and put you down for sure. He can obviously take the fight to the floor and submit you. So the guy is a finisher, really, is what you're getting with him. But he does tend to slow down. He is vulnerable a little bit on the feet as well, so he has his flaws. And Collier's the type of guy, man, I'll tell you what, he's definitely a promising guy. I mean, overall, because he's such a well-rounded fighter. He's only 26 years old as well. So he's got, I think, a well put together MMA game. Now, fight IQ at times for Collier is not the greatest. His cardio, again, what I just mentioned about Abreu, at times is not the greatest. But I'm expecting, I guess, a little bit better from him as her career progresses. I mean, he has taken this fight on short notice, and he made his UFC debut on short notice as well. But that's the thing. I mean, Collier in his UFC debut, he was dominating that fight and got KO'd by Miranda by head kick and then some punches afterwards at the end of round 1. So it's frustrating because, I mean, he was on his way, would look like he was on his way dominating that fight. So he's a talented fighter everywhere, but his cardio and IQ are definitely his flaws. He's going to have a big advantage here as far as, I think, his reach. He's got a 78-inch reach compared to a 73-inch reach for Abreu. So Collier's going to be the longer fighter. He's going to be pure strength is going to be close, but still, I think he's going to be the more dangerous fighter as far as the stand-up game goes. Collier has some pretty decent wrestling in his own right. So he's going to be a handful for Abreu for sure. But that fight IQ still bothers me enough that I'm going to slightly lean towards Abreu here because I think both these guys are more than capable of finishing each other. So it's definitely a tough one. And it's a hard fight and a hard spot to bet against a guy like Collier because the guy is so dangerous and so capable of finishing opponents. But my slight lean is towards Abreu. I think he is going to continue to improve his overall game. And again, if Collier does make a mistake, I think it's more likely for Abreu to hop in there and finish the fight here as well.
I think Jake Collier has several advantages in this fight. I mean, he was looking so good in his UFC debut on relatively short notice against Vitor Miranda and had him on the ropes and then just got caught right at the end of the first round. So the fact that he was doing that against a guy that is a really talented striker, a guy that was a striking coach at one of the top gyms in Brazil, I think if he can come in here with that same attitude and go in there and be aggressive against Abreu, I think he can definitely outwork him. Abreu has some power on the feet, but he's far from a technical striker, and Collier should be able to just outwork him on the feet. Now, of course, if this fight goes to the ground, Abreu's ground game is phenomenal. He has really been able to utilize submissions well throughout his career. On The Ultimate Fighter, his ground game looked good, but he has not been using the ground game at all so far in his UFC stint. His first 2 UFC fights, he hasn't attempted one. He's actually had to defend a takedown or 2. So I think if he comes in here with that same mindset of just wanting to be an exciting stand-up fighter and just getting into stand-up affairs against people, he's going to be on the receiving end of a beatdown. Jake Collier is a very talented striker. He's going to have several advantages in terms of height and reach and pace. Plus, he's fighting in America compared to Abreu having to actually come over from Brazil. So it's kind of flip-flopped from Collier's last fight where he had to go into Brazil against the Brazilian. Collier is taking this fight on relatively short notice, a little over a month. But I think that's plenty of time for him to acclimate and be ready and come in there and cut the weight and be fully prepared for what Abreu presents. Now, if Abreu can get his hands on Collier on the ground, I think Collier could be in trouble. But Collier is a talented enough striker, a good enough athlete, that he should be able to keep this fight upright. And as long as he doesn't get clipped by one of the big bombs that Abreu likes to throw, he should be in good enough shape to pull off this upset, whether by knockout or decision. But I think he could knock Abreu out. So my pick is going to be Jake Collier. Now dropping down to the lightweight division, we have Joe Proctor, who is 10-3, taking on Justin Edwards, who is 9-4. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how's the public shifted things so far?
I opened Proctor minus 210, the comeback on Edwards plus 160, and right now looking over the line at 5 dimes. It is Proctor minus 190. The comeback is plus 165. So again, line margins kind of just tighten up a little bit. Two-way action coming in. Nothing significant to move the line that drastically at all. So there are a lot of split opinions on this fight. And what we should see is a very competitive fight because both of these guys are fairly well-rounded. I mean, they both prefer – well, I think Proctor's a little bit more well-rounded where he can mix up his striking and his grappling a little bit better. And Edwards, I think, is more primarily of a grappler. But he does have some underrated striking in his own right, depending on who he's matched up with. And a matchup like this is where he could keep it close, I think, everywhere. So this is definitely an interesting fight and a tough one to break down because I think you got to slightly lean towards Proctor in almost every area. Again, both these guys have decent BJJ. I think Proctor is very underrated in that category as well. He's got decent takedown defense. The striking advantage will belong to Proctor. He's going to be a little bit longer. He's got a couple inches of reach on Edwards. I think he mixes up everything a little bit better. I think that Proctor's chin is a little bit more solid as well. I mean, you can't really say Edwards has a bad chin because that his only knockout loss came to Thatch, and Thatch is just a beast, obviously, as we all know, and that's a different weight class altogether as well. So at 155, I think Edwards' chin is very solid, and it's been throughout his career. As far as explosive submission game goes, I think you got to give the lean a little bit to Edwards because he does have some outstanding guillotine chokes. I mean, once he gets around your neck, you're done. I don't care who you are. It's hard to get out of there. And, I mean, he's got that kind of grip and that kind of squeeze and that kind of technique to go along with it. So Proctor definitely has to be careful coming into this fight, not sticking his head somewhere where he shouldn't really because Edwards could definitely grab his neck and choke him out there. So, but I think as far as point fighting goes, and that's what this is going to end up being, I think these guys are going to more than likely hit the scorecards along the way. If there is a finish, again, I think it'll be maybe Edwards catching Proctor along the way by submission, or Proctor ends up knocking Edwards out along the way, because I think he's going to be the busier fighter. I think Proctor's a little bit more active overall, and I think he's going to be able to push a little bit of a higher pace. These guys are both strong for 155 as well. So this is a very competitive matchup. But again, from top to bottom on this whole card, we're going to see these type of matchups that are very competitive. So I do think that Proctor does land more strikes on the feet. I think that he's able to stay off his back. I think he's able to control the cage a little bit more. So I think what we're going to see here is Joe Proctor winning, like I said, probably a decision here. So I'm going to lean towards Proctor a little bit, but it's not huge confidence. I mean, I know Edwards doesn't generally get a ton of respect out there from the MMA betting community, but I mean, based on his career, he's done okay, probably better than most people think. I mean, he loses to some solid fighters out there. Well, I guess you can look at his resume closer and kind of contradict that a little bit, but I think that he's definitely game, and he's a little bit better than most people give him credit for, is what I'm trying to say. But I think there's more of an upside to Proctor, and I do think he's just a step ahead of Edwards at this point. He is the better overall fighter, so I am going to lean with Proctor as far as my pick goes, and I do think he probably comes away with the win.
Justin Edwards and Joe Proctor have both had a bit similar UFC careers, although Edwards started his career at welterweight for his first 5 fights before dropping down. And I do think that Edwards is going to be game. Proctor is a little bit better with the power strikes. He pushes a slightly better pace. Neither guy has a great chin. I think they've both been knocked down twice. And considering Edwards fought Brandon Thatch, I mean, you really can't blame him for getting knocked down in that fight. So I do think that Edwards will be pushing a good pace and hanging in there. I think that it's kind of weird watching Joe Proctor fight. I mean, it's almost like he's moving in slow motion at times. So he is probably one of the least explosive fighters in the lightweight division. So I do expect Edwards to have a slight athleticism advantage, although if Proctor connects, Edwards is probably going to get hurt. Proctor should be the slightly better ground fighter, although he doesn't really attempt takedowns. So if the fight does go to the ground, it's probably Edwards who's going to be initiating the clinch or the takedown. And I think Proctor could reverse him and gain the superior position, although you can't sleep on Edwards' ground game either. I mean, that was a really impressive choke he had on Josh Neer. So overall in this fight, I do think that while Proctor isn't the smoothest or quickest guy, he does have a slightly better chin, a slightly better ability to avoid damage, and I do think that he's able to connect with a slightly better striking pace and power. So, and he also does have a very small reach advantage, which could come into play. He's also about 3 years younger, so I'm going to slightly lean Joe Proctor, but I do think that Justin Edwards is going to give him a run for his money. So my pick is Proctor. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, I think you guys are definitely calling this correctly. It's hard to really see where the big differences lie. It's back and forth on the page, very similar backgrounds. And then on the performance metrics, when one guy has one advantage, the other guy counteracts it a little bit. So here we go. In the striking metrics, Edwards, his biggest asset is actually his power. He hasn't really stood and trade a lot, landed a lot of power head strikes. His accuracy is low. But his knockdown rate actually is high, which is weird. He only has one knockdown, but he did get it quickly. But then again, his defense is kind of soft. He's been knocked down twice. He eats more punches than he delivers, whereas Proctor is more technical. He's a little bit more accurate and also has tougher defense, but he also has been dropped twice. So on the feet, very close. I think you definitely give the edge to Proctor being slightly longer and slightly busier. He just throws a little bit more volume and he tends to walk forward a little bit more. And that's gonna show well on the cards, at least round to round, if no one's getting knocked out here, which, we probably won't see. But then on the ground, it's very different profiles, and yet the end result is the same. Neither guy has been very dominant on the ground, and yet Joe Proctor never has attempted a single takedown. Meanwhile, Edwards has been attempting them at a very high rate, just with very low accuracy. So Edwards' takedown defense is terrible, but Proctor might not exploit that. Proctor's takedown defense is good. Edwards' takedown offense is very busy. So we see these complete opposites on the page here. I think all in all, a lot of this cancels each other out. I think Proctor tries to keep his distance. He stays busy, but he is able to defend the takedowns, and it's very close back and forth. And ultimately, I think Proctor gets a decision, but not with a lot of confidence.
Now, sticking with the lightweight division, we have Chris Wade, who is 9-1, taking on Christos Giagos, who is 11-3. Now, Nick, what's the MMA odds maker's perspective on this one?
Up in Wade, minus 245, the comeback on Giagos, plus 175. And right now, there has been more action on Giagos coming in. It is all the way down to minus 165 for Wade. And Giagos is actually plus 145. So Giagos gaining some fans with his fighting style. I mean, the guy definitely is a fun fighter to watch. I mean, he puts it all out there on the line, and he's a very talented fighter. I mean, the guy's young, 25 years old. Physically, he's strong. Physically, he's capable of finishing a fight standing or on the ground. So he's definitely a dangerous guy to be in there with, in the cage with. But he does have his flaws. And one of his flaws is obviously his sub-defense. Against talented grapplers and against talented wrestlers, he's prone to getting put on his back and getting controlled a little bit, and then possibly getting finished on the ground as well. So that's one thing against an aggressive, grappler or a guy that's going to look for takedowns and kind of control him in that aspect. He does struggle at times. And he does also tend to slow down as the fight goes. But overall, the guy is definitely a talented fighter, no doubt about it. Now, the other part of this fight, Wade, he's actually a very talented fighter, and he's done some good things already in his UFC career. I mean, he's got 2 very solid victories coming into this fight as well. And his main aspect of the game and what he goes for is obviously takedowns. I mean, Wade is another very complete fighter. I mean, he's decent on the feet. I think Giagos actually has the advantage. If he stays standing, I think he's the more dangerous fighter, but it'll be close, and Wade could definitely dish it out as well. But I think Wade, obviously, he's a grappling-oriented fighter. He looks for the takedowns, looks to control, looks to sub you, has some decent ground and pound, and both these guys are physically strong. So you got to give the slight edge here to Wade because of what he's going to try to do. He's going to come into this fight. He's going to look to take Giagos down, control him, look for the submission possibly because, I mean, obviously that's a glaring flaw in Giagos' game. Just looking at his record without anything else, the guy's lost all 3 losses have been by submission, and Wade has a very capable submission game to go along with his wrestling. So that's what he's going to look to do here. So that's why you got to slightly lean towards Wade in this fight. I think it's going to be close. I have a lot of respect for Giagos. I think the guy is definitely a talented fighter, and he's going to make Wade work for everything here. And Wade has to be careful because Giagos is a heck of a finisher. But I still think that stylistically, the way these guys match up, it's Wade's ground game that's going to come into play here. And Wade, he's going to probably be able to take the fight to the ground and control it at least, if not be able to finish and sub Giagos. So that's my lean. That's where I'm going with this fight. I know all the action has come in on the underdog, but I still think that Wade's advantages on the ground are going to probably outweigh all the physical attributes or all the finishing ability that Giagos has everywhere. So my official pick is going to be a slight lean towards Wade.
Giagos is a little bit more diverse in terms of what he's dangerous with. Wade does not present much of a threat on the feet. Wade is not the most powerful striker in terms of ground and pound. So Giagos does have the advantage there. I think Giagos could pressure Wade in the stand-up department. I think if Giagos somehow does scramble and get top position, he's going to be dangerous in terms of the ground and pound as well. Those are his 2 biggest threats. But Giagos' other big threat is the wrestling, and Chris Wade is just hands down the better wrestler of the 2. He's been in there against better fighters, although Giagos did face Gilbert Burns, but he got completely mauled by him. I think Chris Wade would have held his own a little bit against Gilbert Burns just because of how talented of a wrestler he is. This kid is so good at getting on top of you, and then when he does, he is just smothering. He's either going to be looking for a submission or he's just going to work and grind his way to a decision. That's what he's done in both of his UFC fights so far. He was able to get that very impressive submission very quickly in his UFC debut. And then his next fight against Zhang Lepeng, he had to grind it out, and he just took the fight to the ground, stayed on top for all 3 rounds. So I think that there's a very good chance that he could do either of those against Giagos. If Giagos cannot keep this fight standing, if Giagos cannot somehow get top position during a scramble, I think he's going to be in big trouble, and he's either going to get worn down and submitted late, he might get submitted early, or he's just going to get grinded out and he'll end up losing a decision. I think this is definitely Chris Wade's fight to lose. I think Wade is an exceptional talent in the lightweight division due to that just incredible wrestling ability. And he's going to be able to get this fight, close the distance, drag it to the ground, and just take over. So I pick Chris Wade, and I think he wins relatively convincingly. Now moving up to the welterweight division, we have Brian Ebersol, who is 51-16-1 with 1 no contest, taking on Omari Akhmedov, who is 14-2. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I open Akhmedov minus 150, the comeback on Ebersol plus 110, and right now it is Akhmedov minus 135, and the comeback on Ebersol is plus 115. So again, line margins is kind of tightened up a little bit, and it seems to be staying near pick'em with a slight edge towards Akhmedov here in this fight. And it is a tough one to call, man, because I'll tell you what, Ebersol, I mean, throughout his career, I mean, I have a ton of respect for him because he is such a well-rounded fighter. Underestimated, actually, in the wrestling aspect of things. I mean, the guy has a pretty underrated takedowns. His ability on the ground is pretty good. He's got good ground and pound as well. He's sneaky good on the feet at times. He's got that underestimated or underrated power, I should say, as well. So he's a finisher, another guy that we've been talking about. I mean, he can grind you out and win on the cards, or he can sub you, or he can knock you out. So Ebersol is a very complete fighter. My problem is he's been a little bit too consistent throughout his career. He hasn't been fighting as often as you like to see. Now, of course, he's only 34 years old, but in MMA years, he's way beyond that as well. So the guy has taken some punishment. He's been in some wars throughout his career. So you have to look at that a little bit closer. So, I mean, that last fight actually against John Howard also could have realistically went either way. A lot of people think it should have went to Howard. So it is hard to argue that, but Ebersol is definitely that talented where he's going to make things in life miserable for most people. Akhmedov, on the other hand, man, I tell you what, he's a very talented guy too, and he's actually been a little bit of a disappointment because he's a very talented fighter, but he's inconsistent in a lot of ways with his fighting. I mean, he's been fighting a little bit more steady, but as of late, but I mean, one fight he looks good, the next fight he looks terrible. So I think that it really all depends on which version we get to show up here. I think that Akhmedov, he's really strong. He's very solid everywhere. I mean, he's got decent wrestling. Obviously, he proved that in his last fight against Nielsen. He's got enough power on the feet to do damage as well. He's got a submission game to go along with it. So he's a very complete overall fighter. So hopefully his cardio holds up. It did look better in the Nielsen fight. I mean, that was one thing that I was kind of questioning throughout his career thus far, but it seemed to be a little bit better in his last fight. And I think that if his cardio holds up and he shows up, he can win this fight. Honestly, I think he could be just a little bit more aggressive than Ebersol at times. I think that he can control the tempo of the fight. I'm not counting Ebersol out though, because I think Akhmedov's chin is a little bit suspect. He has been getting rocked in fights as well. And of course, against Gunnar Nelson, Gunnar, kind of made quick work of him there, beat him with that guillotine choke by the end of the first round, but he was actually beating him on the feet as well. Had Akhmedov backpedaling in that fight quite a bit. So really, I guess it's a question mark on both guys here. It's who's going to show up and who's going to come to fight here. I'm going to lean a little bit more towards Akhmedov in this fight because I do think that there's more upside to him at this point. I mean, physically he should be a little bit stronger, and I think he should be the little bit more dangerous of the, more maybe capable of controlling the fight and maybe landing that big knockout punch. But I doubt that. I think more than anything else, this fight probably hits the scorecards, and I think it's going to be a really coin flip type of decision. But I lean towards Akhmedov because I think that, again, he could be in control of this fight a little bit more so than Ebersol. But Ebersol, don't sleep on this guy at all. And it's kind of tough to bet against the guy, especially with the flaws that I just mentioned about Akhmedov as well. So another fight that's really a pick'em fight, near pick'em for a reason, with a slight lean towards Akhmedov. But I think it's probably going to go that way, and we're going to see a very close competitive decision win for Akhmedov.
And this truly is a fight I feel could go either way. Akhmedov and Ebersol both are pretty good wrestlers. Both guys have some talent on the feet and some power. The big difference here is Ebersol is so much more experienced, but with that experience comes all the amount of damage he has taken throughout that lengthy career. I mean, this is a guy that went toe-to-toe with Chris Lytle, and he does have the ability to go out there and look good, but he just has not done it whatsoever in his recent UFC fights. Ebersol has actually looked like a shell of himself. And honestly, the last time that Brian Ebersol looked really good in the UFC was when he took on Dennis Hallman in 2011. So it's been a while. So almost 4 full years since he's looked really good in a UFC fight. Like the TJ Waldberger fight, he got dropped. The James Head fight was ugly. The Rick Story fight, he just got taken down the whole time. And then the John Howard fight, that could have gone either way. Neither guy really did a whole lot. So I wasn't impressed with either man in that fight. And against Akhmedov, it's a winnable fight. Akhmedov is definitely not even really a mid-tier UFC welterweight, but he is big. He is really strong. And that is the type of fighter that Ebersol's had some trouble with. If Akhmedov can drag this fight to the ground, while Ebersol does have a decent wrestling background to fall back on, he actually just does not do that well in terms of the wrestling in his UFC. The only guy he's really been able to out-grapple have been guys like Claude Patrick and the aforementioned Dennis Hallman. So I can see Akhmedov actually scoring some takedowns, winning some scrambles, and dropping some punishment. Ebersol probably will be a little craftier. He clearly has faced so many different fighters throughout his career. I highly doubt Akhmedov's going to bring anything he hasn't seen. But again, Ebersol's been fighting so inconsistently over the last few years that I just don't know what he's going to bring to the table. He might be out there and just sit there and let the fight come to him like it has been. And that's just not the type of Brian Ebersol that wins fights in the UFC. So just based on his recent performances, I'm actually going to slightly lean towards Omari Akhmedov. I think he can outwork Ebersol on the feet. He does push a little bit of a higher pace, although Ebersol is much more accurate. And I think Akhmedov's going to be more aggressive in taking this fight to the ground, where Ebersol does have a couple issues in terms of getting up off his back. So I think Akhmedov does just enough here to get the win, although it really could go either way, especially if the real Brian Ebersol ever shows up. So officially, my pick is Omari Akhmedov. Now moving up to the heavyweight division, we have Sean Jordan, who is 17-6, taking on Derrick Lewis, who is 12-3 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened at Lewis minus 125, the comeback on Jordan minus 115. So virtually a pick 'em with a very, very slight lean towards Lewis. Now it is a 40-cent line settings too, so typically this would be exactly a pick 'em fight, and I think it is one of those fights. And if you're looking at the odds right now, it's Lewis minus 120, even money for Jordan. And this fight did flop early on, and Jordan became a slight favorite. Now it's back, action's come back in on Lewis, so Lewis is the favorite again, sticking near pick 'em with a slight lean towards Lewis. This is a tough one. I mean, obviously, both guys have power on the feet. They're more than capable of finishing each other. Both guys have decent wrestling. I mean, if you look at the athleticism, you got to give the edge to Jordan for sure. He's smaller though in this case. He's going to have a disadvantage when it comes to height and reach. But Jordan is definitely the better athlete. He's going to have the speed advantage over Lewis as well. And he's the better pure as far as technical wrestling goes too as well. So Jordan does have, I think, the more well-rounded MMA game of the two. Lewis is just a powerhouse though. I mean, he's very strong, obviously, for heavyweight. He has a ton of knockout power. I mean, 11 of his 12 wins have come by knockout, which is very impressive. And, I mean, as far as the sub-game goes, he doesn't really have too much there. I mean, he's rather get you on the ground and ground and pound you, try to finish you that way. That's the type of fighter he is. And that's going to kind of be difficult against Jordan, I think. But he has improved a lot. Both these guys met a long time ago. Back in the day when it was, I believe, Lewis's only his second fight, and Jordan was able to beat him by decision. So this is a much different Lewis that Jordan faced back then, but this is also a much different Jordan though as well. I think that the guy has improved significantly throughout his career, and we've seen some of those improvements. I mean, in his last couple fights, Jordan has looked good. I used to question some things about Jordan, but he seems to have really gotten better, which is, I mean, for a guy that's been fighting a while, it's hard to say that about. So a lot of good things about both these guys. I do think that as far as chin goes, I mean, obviously Lewis did get tagged and knocked out recently by Mitrione, which was his first KO loss in his career. So it was a little bit surprisingly. But again, you know what? It was almost the athleticism of Mitrione and the speed advantage that did clip him early on in that fight as well. So that's what happened to Lewis there, and it was a bit surprising how quick that went down like that. But that being said, he's facing another guy that has that kind of athleticism and that kind of power that he could come out there and just maybe clip Lewis early and put him down. If not, he could try to maybe pin Lewis up against the cage, control him that way. I think Jordan's not going to have an easy time getting Lewis to the ground. But again, he is the more technical of the two as far as wrestling goes. So, it is possible that he does get that, this fight to the ground at times too, but he's got to be careful because he does not want Lewis ending up on top, whether it's in a scramble, because that's the thing with Lewis. It seems like you do get him in a bad position on the ground. Somehow, some way, the guy scrambles out of that bad position, ends up getting in a dominant position himself, and then starts unloading. So, with that kind of power he's got, I think that Jordan does have a bit of a suspect chin. I mean, if you're going to compare chin to chin, I trust Lewis is a little bit more. And this fight, more times than not, is probably going to play on the feet. So as far as clinch game goes, I think Lewis probably has the advantage there. He's got to watch out for Jordan's uppercut. I think one of the best attributes of Jordan's stand-up game are his hands, obviously, and he has a sneaky uppercut that is more than capable of dropping people. So, but I think, however this fight goes, I think that Lewis could probably do damage enough on the feet to probably get Jordan out of there as well. So I am leaning, I think the size and the overall advantage for Lewis, I think he's just a little bit stronger, and he's going to be more of a handful than it was in their first meeting a while back for Jordan as well. So even though I think Jordan is the more complete fighter, I think stylistically and their times of their career, obviously Lewis is going to be focused. He's going to want to redeem that loss for sure. And I do think there's a little bit more upside for Jordan, or for Lewis rather, in the UFC heavyweight division right now than it is Jordan. Even though he's a talented fighter and he's been improving, I still think that Lewis is a dangerous and difficult matchup for a lot of guys out there as well. So a coin flip fight, really, wouldn't be surprised if these guys who won by knockout here, but it's probably going to end that way. I don't expect this fight to hit the scorecards this time around. I know it did in the original meeting, but still, this is, again, different time in both guys' careers. So I'm going to lean a little bit more towards Lewis, and mainly because I do trust his chin a little bit more.
Derrick Lewis is a very big, strong, physical fighter, and he can win fights when he gets on top of you and just starts dropping huge ground and pound. He's actually really similar to Soa Palele in terms of the fighting style. He has some power on the feet, but he really isn't that dangerous in the pure stand-up because he's not the fastest guy. So when Derrick Lewis is able to get things going, it's when he's able to close the distance, drag the fight to the canvas, get on top of you, and then just start wailing on you. And it worked really well in 3 of his wins so far in the UFC against Ruin Potts, Jack May, Guido Inocencio. But when he was forced to stand, Matt Mitrione knocked him out pretty quickly, like really quickly. And I think if Sean Jordan can force him to stand, I think Sean Jordan is by far the better athlete. He's quicker. I think Sean Jordan has almost as much pure punching power. So while they did go to a decision the first time around, it was Derrick Lewis's second career fight, and Jordan, it was like his 9th, but they were both still on the regional scene in Louisiana. So they are both completely different fighters now. But again, Derrick Lewis, he is a bit limited in terms of what he's capable of doing. He really does need to get that top position if he wants to win fights. I don't see him connecting on Sean Jordan's chin in the pure stand-up. And if this fight does go to the ground, while Lewis is bigger, Jordan is the better wrestler, the better athlete. I can see him winning a scramble, gaining top position, and definitely winning this fight. Like, honestly, Jack May was able to get top position briefly against Lewis, so I can definitely see him doing it again with Sean Jordan getting top position this time around. Jordan out-wrestled Mike Russo for the second round en route to winning that fight, so I do think that Sean Jordan has a lot to prove here, and while he did lose those fights to Gabriel Gonzaga and Matt Mitrione, I think Derrick Lewis would have lost those too. And Sean Jordan does have that ability to just outwork Derrick Lewis. I think he has a lot of intangibles working in his favor. The only thing against him is the size. And plus, he does have a little bit of confidence going into this fight because he's already beaten Derrick Lewis. So I expect Sean Jordan to outwork Lewis on the feet. I expect him to actually get top position on the ground. And I think Sean Jordan actually wins this fight, whether by decision or by knockout. So he's going to be my pick. Now, kicking off the main card, we have a bantamweight contest between Francisco Rivera, who is 10-4 with 1 no contest, taking on Alex Caceres, who is 10-7 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
How about Rivera minus 140, the comeback on Caceres, even money, and right now over 5 times, it's minus 115 for Rivera. The comeback on Caceres is minus 105. Now, initial action did come in on Caceres, and it flipped the line, but heavier action started coming back in towards Rivera, so Rivera's back to basically a pick-em fight with a slight lean towards Rivera, similar to where the line opened. I do think this is a very tough fight for people, and we're going to see some decent action on both sides here, because both these guys at bantamweight are a threat to most, and they're climbing the ladder and trying to earn their way towards a title shot here, and both of them definitely have some solid skill set. Rivera, of course, is well known for his knockout power and his striking ability. I mean, the guy is definitely a beast on the feet. I think he's one of the hardest punchers in bantamweight, in the bantamweight level for sure. I mean, the guy, you don't get too many second chances with this guy. I mean, usually if he clips you, rocks you, he can follow up and finish you. So very dangerous, very explosive striker. His wrestling game, his takedown defense, overall, it's getting better. But if any weakness at all for Rivera, it's definitely his ground game, I think. He still needs to put in some work there. He's been subbed a couple times throughout his career, and he's been put on his back as well. So overall, he's got decent takedown defense, depending on who his opponent is, because he's faced obviously some quality opposition too. And that's what's got him in some tough spots. But overall, Rivera is a pretty solid, well-rounded fighter. Now, I think his chin is a little bit suspect as well, and his striking defense, you can argue that it's obviously not very good, but at the same time, it gets him by, and he's only been KO'd once, even though he's been rocked in a few fights along the way as well. So Rivera basically is that type of fierce striker that can get the job done on the feet, no doubt about it. Now, Caceres, though, on the other hand, I think he's a little bit more of a complete fighter. I think Caceres on the feet, Caceres is very underrated. I mean, he's long. Obviously, he's going to have, I believe 3 inches of actual reach on Rivera here in this spot. And he utilizes that reach decent at times too. And, he's got ability to end the fight with kicks. He's got ability. He doesn't have huge knockout power, but I think he throws enough, and he's consistently trying to pick his opponents apart. And he has a little bit of power behind those as well. So he is definitely not somebody to take lightly on the feet. He's got capabilities there as well. But the impressive part about Caceres is honestly his ground game. I mean, I think he's got a little bit underrated wrestling. I know in his last fight it didn't work out too good for him, but Kanhara, I mean, he's honestly an underrated fighter that not many people really realize how good that guy can be. So that's a different matchup completely, though, than he's facing Rivera. So I think in most cases, Caceres' grappling and his wrestling game, his takedown defense, really does well for him against most people in the bantamweight division. So he's got that going for him. And I think submission-wise, now submission defense has been at times a problem. Obviously, Caceres has been submitted 5 times, but he has, I mean, I think you have to look beyond that, and it's a little bit more difficult to sub Caceres than that indicates. But, I mean, again, he's faced some high-quality competition, some guys that could definitely finish the fight with subs, so you got to give him a little bit of leeway there. Offensively, I think the guy has a really dangerous submission game as well. He's pretty smart. He's got decent fight IQ. He likes to take your back and, try to look for the rear naked choke. And he has some decent ground and pound on the ground as well. So I think Caceres is just a little bit more of the complete fighter than Rivera. I think he's further along. But I can also say a similar thing about Caceres' defense and his chin, as I did with Rivera. I think that Caceres, he hasn't been officially KO'd ever, but he seems to get rocked almost every fight. The guy gets clipped and wobbled a little bit, but he does recover fast, and he hasn't been knocked out. So you got to give him credit where credit's due, but he cannot risk taking a lot of punches, though, from Rivera, because Rivera has that kind of power that there's a first time for anything, and Rivera could definitely end the fight by knockout if he lands flush on Caceres, no doubt about that. But I do think that Caceres realizes this. I think his game plan, I mean, he's been training with MMA Lab for a while now, and I think that that's definitely improving his overall game. They're going to have a good game plan coming into this fight, and I think they realize that, he can hang with Rivera on the feet, because if it stays standing, I mean, it'll be back and forth a little bit, but Rivera is definitely the more dangerous, more explosive fighter. So Caceres is going to look to take this fight to the floor. I think Caceres has better cardio overall. I think he's got, obviously, the ground advantage, and I think he's going to look to take Rivera's back and probably submit Rivera along the way. If it hits the scorecards, it's going to be a very competitive decision, but I do think Caceres can outpoint Rivera as well, because I think he's going to be the busier fighter consistently for 3 rounds as well. So Caceres, he has a little bit more, I think, ways and a better chance to win this fight here. If he does not get knocked out by Rivera, I think he is going to probably win the fight, either by finish or on the card. So I like that, and I think I'm going to slightly lean towards Caceres in what should be an awesome fight. I'm really looking forward to this fight.
Francisco Rivera, while he does have a lot of power, he has been consistently overrated throughout his entire UFC career. So really, Alex Caceres has an advantage against him just about everywhere statistically. I mean, he is taller, he's longer. I think he has the better chin. And while Rivera does have slightly better power and knockdown ability, Caceres has some decent power as well. And he's definitely starting to learn how to use it a little bit better. So that's something else he has going for him. On the ground, Rivera might be the slightly better wrestler, but I actually favor Caceres on the ground because he is a much more dynamic ground fighter with some pretty solid submission ability, including a very good triangle choke that he's used multiple times. So that's something he can pull out. And on the feet, while Rivera has more power, I think Caceres is the more composed technical striker. So at distance, Caceres should have the advantage. He can throw a few more kicks. I think Rivera is probably going to be winging haymakers that should be pretty easy to avoid. And Caceres is the younger fighter. So statistically, Caceres has a lot of advantages in this fight. And I think he's going to be able to use them pretty well. I also expect that Caceres being a southpaw could factor into this fight just because it is difficult to train for one. You're not used to fighting them. And Rivera, I just honestly think he is overrated. And this is a perfect opportunity for Caceres to come in here and get in there and make a statement and get right back in the mix because for a little brief instance, he was a contender in the bantamweight division, and I think it's about time that he started contending again. So I think this fight's pretty cut and dry, and I'm going to side with Alex Caceres. So he is my pick. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, you guys mentioned some key performance metrics, and the numbers do confirm Alex Caceres is definitely the more technical striker. He has very high accuracy, and he does that using a very high pace, which is very hard. That means even throwing combinations, he's landing a lot of those. Not a lot of power, but you don't see that with guys who are very forward and very high pace. Normally, you see more power from the guys who are a bit more reserved, waiting for that key one power shot. But the ability to throw combinations, lots of jabs, land them with very high accuracy. His jab is vicious. I mean, it lands almost half the time. And for a southpaw with a reach advantage, that's going to be important. And overall, his chin has held up better than Rivera. Both guys have been stunned, and it's important to know both guys actually have a chin rating that is below the division average, but Rivera is way, way, way below. He's been dropped 4 times with a much worse chin rating. Rivera, his one area, he does have good power, above average power with 4 knockdowns of his own. So Caceres, as Nick pointed out, is vulnerable if he gets tagged, and Rivera does have the heat to do that. He basically, Brian, you mentioned he wings his punches. He's throwing haymakers. 72% of all of his standing head strikes are power strikes, not jabs. A normal number for that should be more like 50%. Most people use a 1-2 combination, a jab to a power strike. This guy does not throw a lot of jabs. He is throwing bombs, which can affect your overall striking game in many ways. On the ground, Caceres really isn't a guy who tries to take it to the ground very often, but he does have submissions. So he is able to finish it there. Doesn't attempt a lot of takedowns, but does land them when he does try for that. And Rivera doesn't have a lot of takedowns either. So neither one of them has been in control a lot on the ground. I think their submissions have been more defensive than anything else. So they could just go toe to toe here, but overall, I think I would also give a ground advantage slightly to Caceres. So I do see enough leans to support Caceres as a favorite. He is a little vulnerable against the power and those haymakers that Rivera is throwing, but at least on paper, there's enough of advantages on one side to lean towards Caceres.
Now, sticking with the bantamweight division, we have Joe Soto, who is 15-3, taking on Anthony Burchak, who is 11-2. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
I opened Soto minus 230 to come back on Burchak plus 170 and has dipped down under 200 as well. Now it's minus 170 for Soto. Burchak is plus 150. So Burchak getting love here in this fight. And it's to be noted that originally they were supposed to fight a little while back, and obviously Soto was pulled from that fight and put into the Dillashaw title fight there. So, but that line was actually minus 125. It opened and it closed, well, similar. It was around 115. It was almost a pick 'em with a slight lean towards Soto before it was all said and done. It was before it was pulled from that card. So they kind of rematched him here, and it should be a pretty good fight. And it's a fight that I think Soto has gained a lot of respect, even though he lost to Dillashaw there. I mean, his performance in that fight definitely gained him some fans and definitely gained him some respect, because there's no doubt about it. I mean, Soto, he's been fighting for a while. I mean, he's a Bellator veteran, former Bellator champion actually. And the guy is legit. I mean, because he's well-rounded. He's got that wrestling game that you love to see, because he's more than capable of taking most fighters down, controlling them on the mat. He's got a submission game to go along with it, and his stand-up skill. I mean, he's got knockout power on the feet, and he can push the pace and do some damage on the feet as well. So Soto's a very talented, well-rounded fighter, and his technical skill set is really impressive because it's everywhere. I mean, he's technically sound everywhere. So I like that in a fighter like Soto. I think Boetsch, I mean, you could say a lot of the same things about it. He's a well-rounded fighter, aggressive on the feet, aggressive on the ground as well. He's got good wrestling, good BJJ. He scrambles out of bad spots well, but the problem is he gets himself in those bad spots on the ground at times. And again, his aggression on the feet sometimes leads him to some problems as well. I think he's a little bit over aggressive. So skill set for skill set, these guys do match up similar, and Boetsch is definitely a talented fighter. I just think I lean a little bit more towards Soto in this fight, because I think his technical ability is going to come into play here. And I think if he doesn't get knocked out, he's going to probably win this fight either on the cards or by getting superior position on the ground and doing some damage there as well. So that's the tough spot about this. I mean, Soto's definitely been knocked out a couple times in his career, and he's been rocked on other occasions. And so you got to, I think, keep that in the back of your mind a little bit. But Boetsch, I mean, he does have some power on the feet, but he's not necessarily the most devastating striker that Soto has faced. So I think they match up really well together. It should be a very competitive fight. Boetsch is definitely game. I just think stylistically it is kind of a bad matchup for him. So I am going to lean towards Soto in this fight, and I think he is probably going to come away with a win here. So all the early action that's coming in on Boetsch, I can understand it, because you got to give some respect for Boetsch, and at that plus money compared to the original opener in their first meeting, I do understand it. But that being said, I still think that this fight does favor Soto, so he's going to be my pick.
And this should be a competitive fight. Anthony Boetsch was a phenom when he was competing in MFC. He was getting TKOs. He was winning these incredible back-and-forth wars of fights. And I really did have really high expectations for him coming into the UFC, but those ended very quickly when he had a poor fight IQ and then ended up getting tapped out by exactly what the only thing that he could get tapped out by, which was a heel hook. So I just definitely got let down a little bit by Boetsch. Now, Joe Soto, on the other hand, I thought that it was only a matter of time until he got brought to the UFC after being a former Bellator champion at featherweight, dropping down to bantamweight. He looked really good in his post-Bellator career to earn this trip back, and then in his freaking UFC debut, he takes on TJ Dillashaw for the title on ridiculous short notice and lasts until the 5th round. I mean, that just says enough about how tough this guy really is. Now, in this fight, in terms of the pure matchup, Boetsch's best chance to win is probably by knockout, but he is not the greatest stand-up fighter. He is definitely more of a grappler. He likes to get top position. He gets into crazy slugfests, but he is a bit sloppy in terms of his actual stand-up ability. Soto, on the other hand, has some pretty good stand-up. He's measured with his approach, but he has definitely put in the time, and he's a threat on the feet. I think he is the better stand-up fighter of the two. And while Boetsch is a little bit better with submissions and the pure grappling, Soto is definitely the better wrestler of the two. So if this fight goes to the ground, I expect some really fun scrambles and transitions, but I expect Joe Soto to get the upper hand for most of them. So Joe Soto should have several key advantages in this fight, plus the fact that he just went 5 rounds, or at least into the 5th round against the champion, should give him a ton of confidence against a guy that is more towards the lower end of the bantamweight division. I do still think really highly of Anthony Boetsch. I just think this is a tough matchup for him, and I expect Joe Soto to go out there, set the pace, be able to land good technical strikes, good kicks, good punches against Boetsch on the feet, and then secure top position for the most part on the ground. So wherever this fight goes, Joe Soto should have a slight advantage everywhere. And I expect Joe Soto to pick up that first UFC win and work his way back up the UFC bantamweight ladder. So my pick is Joe Soto. Now moving up to the featherweight division, we have Thiago Tavares, who is 23-5-1, taking on Brian Ortega, who is 9-0 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Tavares minus 190, the comeback on Ortega plus 150, and right now it is Tavares minus 175, the comeback on Ortega plus 155. So again, line margins kind of tightened up a little bit here. And it's one of those fights that I think people are hesitant to bet a little bit. One factor being, I mean, if you look at it, it should be a no-brainer as far as the way these guys match up. I mean, Ortega is the very talented jiu-jitsu fighter that is such a threat on the ground. I mean, he's got decent wrestling in most cases. He's got outstanding BJJ. I mean, he's called his nickname is actually T-City because he has such an outstanding triangle choke. But why I'm saying it should be kind of a no-brainer is because Ortega, I mean, his path to victory will be by probably submitting Tavares. And Tavares has outstanding BJJ. He's the better actual wrestler and grappler overall. And I think he's got the more technical skill set on the feet as well. So Tavares is the better, the more complete fighter in this. But still, the line is under 2-1. And it's mainly because I think a lot of people just don't trust Tavares' chin. He has been knocked out 3 times now in his career. He's been rocked beyond that a little bit more. He's been fighting a little bit inconsistent. I mean, his last fight was actually August 2014 in his win over Peralta. And then, of course, he faced some, steroid suspension or whatnot after that. But that being said, I mean, skill set for skill set, I do think that Tavares has the capability and the ability to actually get Ortega on the ground, control him a little bit on the ground, not get submitted by Ortega, and probably win the fight that way. If it stays standing, I think Tavares actually is the better striker, but I think Ortega can be a little bit more dangerous. Now, Ortega does not have any knockouts on his resume, but if you look at his footage, I mean, the guy does throw with some serious intent. I mean, he throws with some power, and if he does clip Tavares on the feet and knock him out, I wouldn't be that shocked at all. Again, I mean, the line's low for a reason. I think a lot of people are banking on maybe Ortega could possibly knock him out and catch him. That's why the line is staying that low. Or maybe Ortega could pull off something that most of us are not expecting. And I mean, he has such good finishing ability on the ground that maybe he does sneak and, Tavares makes a mistake and he does submit Tavares. I find that hard to believe. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Tavares probably can survive on the ground against Ortega, and in most cases, he's probably going to get top position. Or he can actually maybe possibly submit Ortega because, I mean, as far as finishing ability for Tavares as well, his submission game is pretty legit. So if he takes Ortega's back or something of that nature, I could see Tavares finishing on the ground. So really, it's Tavares' fight to win or lose, in my opinion, because he is the more complete fighter. He's faced better competition throughout his career, and the guy has looked really good at 145, no doubt about it. It's just those question marks around Tavares is what makes it tough as far as the betting market goes. Because again, Ortega is going to be a little bit longer on the feet. He's going to have, I believe, like a 4-inch or so reach advantage over Tavares. And even though Ortega is not the striker, it's that chin you got to worry about. So my pick is going to be Tavares because it is his fight to win or lose. But it is tough. We'll see what Tavares shows up in this fight. If it's the one that I'm expecting, he should look pretty good and win this fight. No problem.
Brian Ortega is an extremely dangerous submission grappler. He pushes the pace on the feet, but he basically wants to close the distance, get the fight to the ground, and then just start working you over with his incredible Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu prowess. The problem is Thiago Tavares is a fantastic MMA grappler as well. Now, he has good wrestling, he has great submission ability, and he's a decent striker. Like, honestly, Thiago Tavares should have been fighting in featherweight right after they announced that the featherweight division existed, but he was stubborn. He stuck around in the lightweight division too long, ate a couple knockouts, and now he's finally going down. But he looked incredible in his debut against Robbie Peralta, and I expect him to continue. I mean, he still isn't that old in terms of his MMA career. He has a lot of fights, but he's only 30 years old. The problem, of course, is he has been knocked out 3 times, so when he faces a really good striker, somebody with power, he's always going to have to be on the lookout for that. But against Brian Ortega, while Ortega is aggressive on the feet, he really hasn't knocked out anybody so far. He's had 4 wins by knockout, or 4 wins by submission, 4 wins by decision. So there is a first time for everything, but I think Thiago Tavares should be smart enough and talented enough to avoid getting put out on the feet. Now, in terms of the ground, I would actually expect Thiago Tavares to be looking for takedowns as well, because he's not afraid of the ground against anybody. I mean, maybe at lightweight when he was facing Khabib, that was a problem, but dropping down a weight class, taking on guys his own size, he's actually going to be in a much better position. Tavares has some decent power, some good ground and pound, some excellent submissions on the ground, and he should be the better wrestler against Ortega. So while Ortega did look really good in his UFC debut, he ended up getting that fight overturned because he tested positive for steroids. So who knows? Maybe this guy's been fighting on steroids his entire career, and he has to come in clean this time around because all eyes are on him. So I expect that Ortega might be lacking a little bit in that department if he has been using his entire career. So Thiago Tavares could take advantage. So I actually expect Thiago Tavares to set the pace on the feet. I expect him to set the pace on the ground. And while Ortega, steroids aren't going to make you a better grappler, they're just going to make you stronger. So Ortega still is going to have those really good grappling instincts, but I don't see him catching Thiago Tavares in any submissions. Tavares is going to be too crafty for him, and I think Thiago Tavares gets a really nice, solid win here in his return as well. So I think Thiago Tavares either wins by knockout or probably by decision in a really fun back-and-forth battle that has a lot of the fight taking place on the ground. So my official pick is Thiago Tavares. Now moving up to the lightweight division, we have Dustin Poirier, who is 17-4, taking on Yancy Medeiros, who is 11-2 with 1 no contest. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Poirier minus 165, the comeback on Medeiros plus 125, and right now more action has come in on Poirier because it's now minus 190 plus 165 for Medeiros. So more support coming in on Poirier. He is the more well-rounded fighter. He's been around for a while. His popularity level, there's a lot of good things going for Poirier. So I'm not surprised that the overall action has come in that way. I was expecting it to move a little bit, and it has really. It hasn't moved too drastically now. At one point, I think it was over 2-1, and it's come back down some right now. But as far as stylistical matchups goes, this is a tremendous fight as well. Of course, Poirier is coming back up to 155. He had success in his last fight at 155 against Ferreira. Before that, obviously, he was fighting at 145, and he was a contender in that weight class. So I think by filling out a little bit more, just not going through that weight cut, he feels a little bit more confident in his chin. He definitely looked a lot happier against Ferreira even before the fight started. It seemed like mentally and physically he was in a really good spot. So maybe the move up to 155 is going to work out for Poirier. But here's a big test here in Medeiros, no doubt about it. I mean, Medeiros is one of these guys that is going to continue to get better and more confidence as he progresses his UFC career. He's actually had, I think, 5 fights now in the UFC, but still, most of those fights have been short because he's either been finished or he's finished his opponents relatively fast. So Medeiros doesn't have quite the experience or hasn't fought the UFC level competition that Poirier has. But what I'm trying to get at here is as his career does progress, Medeiros is going to get that confidence. He's going to get that improvement level. I mean, he's training with obviously the Diaz brothers, in the Gracie camp over there too. So I think that's really benefited him a lot. And he has a really tough style to go against because Medeiros is a guy that wrestlers want to get this guy to the ground because it's hard to stand and bang with Medeiros. He could be very successful. That's what he does best. I mean, he's a knockout type of puncher. But the problem is you can't get him to the ground easy. I mean, Medeiros has very good takedown defense and ability to scramble back up to the feet. So the guy can basically keep the fight where he wants it, and where he wants it is standing, even against Poirier. That's what he's going to want to do. He's going to want to stand and bang with Poirier. It's not going to be easy, though, because Poirier obviously is also a very talented striker in his own right. He has power on the feet. He's got knockout capabilities as well. So this is going to be a very tough fight. I think defensively, Medeiros is always going to be concerned because for some reason the guy, I mean, he leaves way too many openings on the feet. He gets tagged a little bit more than you want to see. He does have a very good chin, though, overall. I think he's got a solid chin. He can absorb some punishment. But as we've seen in the Jim Miller fight, I mean, if you do rock him, even towards the body, he's shown some vulnerability in the body as well. You can get him out of his element a little bit and maybe have some success against him. So I think Poirier is going to be aggressive here. He's going to want to try to take this fight to the floor. I don't think he's going to have a lot of success doing so. So I do think this is going to be a firefight on the feet. And that's what makes this fight tough, because Poirier, again, has capabilities of knocking Medeiros out. Medeiros has capabilities, obviously, of knocking Poirier out as well. I think the only question mark with Poirier, really, at times, his cardio seems to be a little bit of a concern. But he's looked great recently. I think that he's addressed some of those issues. He's been training at American Top Team now for a while, and he's looked great. So I think Poirier's cardio is improved. The main concern is his chin. I mean, he's been dropped several times. He gets rocked in several fights as well. He only has one official knockout loss on his resume, and of course, that was to Conor McGregor recently. And again, that was at 145. But still, I mean, he is susceptible to getting hit and getting rocked and getting in some trouble. He manages to pull through and survive and then come out on top most times. So you got to give him credit as well. And defensively, I think he is a little bit more sound than Medeiros. So this is a very tough one. I've been going back and forth. I'm going to probably wait to the weigh-ins and make my official pick if I do make a change. But right now I am leaning a little bit more towards Poirier because, again, he's a little bit more of the complete fighter. And I do think that he can basically try to outpoint Medeiros a little bit, get him in some trouble because Medeiros' defense is a tad bit worse. But at the same time, as far as betting value goes, I think it is a dog or pass situation here because it's really hard to lay juice against somebody like Medeiros. Medeiros is going to have a little bit of length on the feet. I mean, he's only going to have, I think, 1 inch in height, but he's going to have, I believe, at least 3 or 4 inches of pure reach on the feet. And Medeiros, with that kind of knockout power, it's very dangerous to lay almost 2-1 against the guy. I don't think that's a really good idea. So it's a dog or pass situation, no doubt. But as far as official pick goes, I am leaning towards Poirier because he is just the more complete fighter. You know what you're getting with him. He's been a little bit more consistent, and I think Medeiros has to just prove a little bit more, and this is a big fight for him to do that. So my official pick is Poirier for now.
The main thing here for me is Dustin Poirier is far more experienced in the UFC, and the other thing that factors into it, for me at least, is the defense. While Poirier does not have a great chin, he can be knocked out. I actually feel like he has a much better stand-up striking defense, and he's the much more accurate fighter. So you factor those in, and I think that Poirier will be the one that's connecting, even though Medeiros does have a reach and height advantage. Medeiros doesn't really use it that well. He doesn't jab a lot, and when he does jab, it's not that effective. So I think you're going to come in here and see a very motivated, very dangerous Dustin Poirier, just like in his last fight, which was the debut at lightweight. And I didn't give him enough credit. I thought that he would come in and he'd be a little soft, and it just wasn't the case. I mean, he was cutting a lot of weight to make the featherweight division, and without cutting that weight, maybe his chin will be a little bit better. Because of the two, Poirier does have the worst chin. He got knocked out by Conor McGregor. He had been rocked in several fights before against Jonathan Brookins and the Korean Zombie. But at lightweight, maybe that chin will actually be a little bit better because he doesn't have to suck out so much weight. Now, Medeiros is a dangerous fighter in every aspect. He's powerful, he is long, he has a very good ground game, but I think the ground game is going to be a wash because Poirier has an excellent ground game in his own right and the better wrestling of the two. And on the feet, while Medeiros has some good power, he's just not super technical. And with Poirier being a southpaw, that could actually factor in and make this a very interesting fight. So I actually favor Dustin Poirier on the feet a little bit. I think he's going to be the more active fighter. I think he's going to be connecting at a higher rate. And being a southpaw, it'll be a little tougher for Medeiros to adjust to him. And then on the ground, I can see Poirier securing a takedown or two and getting top position and dropping some punishment, maybe even hunting for submissions. Because while Medeiros is a very active fighter and does have a dangerous ground game, he works with the Diaz brothers all the time, I do think that Poirier is the slightly better ground fighter, and Medeiros can be submitted. I mean, if Jim Miller can do it, I think Dustin Poirier can do it too. So I favor Dustin Poirier very slightly in just about every aspect of this fight, and as long as he doesn't get cracked, he's got a really good chance of pulling out the win. So Dustin Poirier is my pick. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, I'm with you guys. I think there are some threats here by Medeiros, but Poirier has been fighting at a higher level for a long time, and his stats are actually still pretty good despite the level of competition. His striking game is very crisp. He has very accurate striking. Perhaps the southpaw approach does help him. Medeiros, though, his accuracy is really, really low, which is strange because he has absurdly long arms for the lightweight division. He's probably had a reach advantage over every one of his opponents, and he does have a reach advantage here, and yet he hasn't really used it that well in terms of actually connecting. He's more of a volume guy. He throws a lot of volume, and he's not landing a lot, but he's coming forward and pushing people back. Now that can be good round to round, but when you're facing a crisp striker like Poirier, you could get hurt. Now Medeiros does have knockdown power. His 2 knockdowns came at a very high rate, although I would say very low sample size here. This is only 20 minutes of cage time, but he does have 2 knockdowns that we're looking at, and his knockdown rate is abnormally high. So that's a risk. I feel like these Hawaiians come in here and they're sometimes underappreciated, underrated, and yet the Hawaiians, fun fact from the Fightnomics book, that there's more Hawaiians in the UFC per capita than from any other state. So there's something going on over there. Those guys are definitely high quality fighters, and they come in sometimes under the radar and they outperform. So Medeiros, I'm not going to sleep on him. I think the odds should stay relatively close, but Poirier's advantages standing up are enough, I think, to support him as a favorite. And then on the ground, he has a dangerous submission game. He's pulled off some good stuff. He's also been caught before himself, but that's against also high level competition. And I would give him the edge on the ground here. So I would also lean Poirier kind of in most areas of this fight, and that's enough to pick him straight up. And I just hope the line doesn't run away, because I think that would be underestimating Medeiros' potential upset strength.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now moving up to the heavyweight division, we have Ben Rothwell, who is 34-9, taking on Matt Mitrione, who is 9-3. Now, Nick, what's the MMA oddsmaker's perspective on this one?
Man, another great fight, really. I opened Mitrione minus 165, comeback plus 125 on Rothwell, and right now it is similar to the Poirier fight that we were just talking about. It's minus 190 for Mitrione. The comeback is plus 165 for Rothwell. So more action coming in on Mitrione. This is another intriguing matchup for sure, because I think Mitrione, for him, this is going to be one of the toughest fights that he's had, really, in his UFC career thus far. I know he's faced some decent competition along the way, but I think Rothwell is the type of guy that's not easy to go out there and finish. And Mitrione, a lot of the fighters that he's faced recently, whether it be Gonzaga, whether it's Sean Jordan, DeFries, those guys have had problems getting knocked out in the past. And with a fighter like Mitrione, of course, you kind of expect it to go probably that route. And we've been on the Mitrione hype train for a while, and it's worked out for us pretty well. But this fight is a little bit different because, again, I think that Rothwell is a little bit tougher than most people think he is. I think his chin's a little bit more solid than people realize as well. But one thing that bothers me about this matchup for Rothwell is he's going to be a little bit slower. Mitrione's going to be a little bit of the more athletic, the faster fighter. And he packs a punch. And Mitrione actually, I think, will be able to land on Rothwell along the way, because Rothwell, his defense at times, he does get hit. So against a power puncher like Mitrione, he's not going to want to absorb too much punishment on the feet, even if he does have a solid chin overall. That being said, I think this is a tough fight for Mitrione because, Rothwell can he could take it, but he can also give it back as well. So he might not have the speed factor, or the speed that Mitrione does, but he definitely has the power to finish the fight, and he's got the fight IQ to go along with it. The guy's been around for a long time. It's funny because Mitrione's actually a few years older than Rothwell, but in fight years, he's not. Rothwell's obviously way beyond Mitrione's level as far as experience goes and the wars that he's been at throughout his career. So you can't really look at the ages here. You got to kind of throw that out the window. And you got to give the advantage actually as far as freshness goes and not taking as much punishment to Mitrione here. But that being said, I have been very impressed with Rothwell. I think that he's really, especially since that Hunt loss, he's really taken the sport a lot more serious. And he's coming off 2 very back-to-back impressive wins over Eamon and Vera as well. So this is a doozy. This is another tough fight because I do favor Mitrione a little bit because of his speed and athleticism, and I think he is the more dangerous of the two as far as maybe landing that knockout punch. But as the fight progresses, if Mitrione can't get him out of there early, Rothwell is going to be game, and I think Rothwell could possibly start taking over this fight and maybe even knock Mitrione out along the way because Mitrione, the really bad spot that we did see against him was against Roy Nelson. Honestly, Nelson just made him look foolish on a feet, but Nelson has that kind of crazy knockout power as well. So Rothwell doesn't have Roy Nelson type of knockout, one-punch knockout power, but he does hit hard. So I think maybe if Mitrione absorbs some of his shots, He might not obviously like it. I mean, Rothwell could possibly pull off the upset win here by knockout as well. Or if it hits the scorecards, I expect a really competitive fight. That being said, I do lean a little bit towards Mitrione in this spot because I do think that, again, his athleticism, his speed, his power is probably going to be the difference here.
Matt Mitrione has spent his entire career in the UFC. I mean, his professional career at least. He had 2 fights in The Ultimate Fighter, and then his first official professional fight was in the UFC. Now, I would say his 3 best wins, though, have been his last 3 fights. Sean Jordan, Derrick Lewis, Gabriel Gonzaga. None of those guys are slouches in the heavyweight division. They're all going to be sticking around for a while, in my opinion. And I really feel like the Gonzaga win in particular really showcased the level of improvement that Matt Mitrione has. I mean, he just goes out there and he has that type of power that can change a fight. And if he connects, you're in big, big trouble. So it's a very, very realistic possibility that even though Ben Rothwell has probably one of the best chins currently in the heavyweight division, Matt Mitrione could still put him out because while Ben Rothwell hasn't officially been knocked out, I mean, I still don't count the Cain Velasquez fight, really, because he was working his way back to his feet, eating punches, and the ref stopped the fight. Matt Mitrione does hit hard enough that it could factor in, and he could hurt Rothwell. Rothwell was rocked, at least briefly, by Brennan Shaw before firing back, and that's something you also have to take into consideration. Rothwell has that type of ability where he can take a punch, get his opponent thinking that they are going to be able to land on him consistently and maybe drop their defense a little bit, and then that's when he fires back. It worked against Schaub, it worked against Alistair Overeem in his last fight, so Rothwell is a very, very dangerous fighter. He has huge power as well, and Matt Mitrione did get knocked out by Roy Nelson. You have to consider that as well. So if Rothwell connects with something really powerful, he could still put Mitrione out. So of the two, Mitrione does have the worst chin, but he is the better athlete. As Nick mentioned, he is more explosive, and he throws at a higher volume rate. So I do favor Matt Mitrione here. If this fight stays standing, Rothwell might have an advantage if it goes to the clinch, maybe if he can drag Mitrione to the ground, but he's not much of a ground fighter in his own right. So I actually think that with the improvements that Mitrione's made, he should be able to get back to his feet and get back to distance where he will have the advantage with the speed and the explosiveness. Mitrione needs to keep this fight at distance because he just has a really good jab. He has a great right cross, and that's where he really is effective. So I expect Mitrione to fight smart here and try to work his way back to his feet to create distance when they're in the clinch, get some separation, and just go right back to doing his thing. And while I do think that Ben Rothwell is a very dangerous, and he is fighting about as good as he's ever fought at this point in his career, Matt Mitrione, while he's older, he still is the better athlete, and I think he is a little bit more dangerous with a little bit more upside. So I favor Matt Mitrione to get out there and either win a decision, or he could be the first guy to officially knock out Ben Rothwell in the UFC. So I'm going to slightly lean Matt Mitrione here. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, if we're looking for a Mitrione KO, that would be a big deal. Obviously, we haven't really seen that happen to Ben Rothwell in the UFC anyway. It did happen to him outside the UFC. But what are the ingredients you need? You need a really powerful striker who has good accuracy, and you need a guy in Ben Rothwell who can be hit and who is, let's be honest, older than Mitrione in fight years, because he has north of 40 professional fights compared to Mitrione's, a dozen or so. And those are the ingredients of what we have here. Mitrione has the 4th highest knockdown rate of an active heavyweight right now in the UFC. He has 8 career knockdowns in the UFC, which is his entire career, of course. He has decent power accuracy, but more importantly, Ben Rothwell has terrible head strike defense. So he has been getting hit, and the fact that he's survived is only going to catch up with him eventually. This is the same story with other guys who have terrible head strike defense. They rely on the fact that they have a sturdy chin, but time eventually catches up with them. And when you face someone like Mitrione, who's very quick, very athletic, and finds people's chins, this is going to be the ultimate test for Rothwell and his quote unquote beard. This is also a guy, Ben Rothwell, who is coming off of TRT. He was taking it for a number of years. He actually had a car accident that allegedly damaged his glands, and he had deficient testosterone production. So he had a medical reason, unlike most people, to be on it. But there is no more that I know of. You cannot be still taking TRT regardless of the reason. So we have not seen guys do all that well. Granted, he's already had one fight and defeated Alistair Overeem since coming off of it. But this is a different type of fight. Mitrione is much more sturdy than Overeem was. Overeem couldn't really handle that one punch. So Rothwell weathered the storm and then caught him once. I don't think that's the scenario that we're going to see here. Rothwell is going to have to more than just weather the storm. He's going to have to really attack Mitrione to get him moving back. Now on the ground, completely different ballgame. Rothwell has actually used wrestling, does attempt takedowns. Matt Mitrione still, all the way into his career, has still yet to attempt a single takedown. That is unbelievable. That's probably some kind of record for the most fights and the most UFC time without attempting one. But it's worked for him. Clearly he's gotten the better of the people on the feet, so that's where he wants to keep this. So I think there's enough advantages here for Mitrione. He is susceptible if Rothwell tries to wrestle him. Mitrione did get exposed a little bit by Brendan Schaub getting submitted. So he does need to keep his distance, and he needs to be careful. He's not going to be able to just drop Rothwell with the first shot. He's going to have to stay on him and be technical. But Mitrione keeps getting better. He's relatively young in his MMA career, yet he's performed pretty well, even though he's a bit older. But this is a second career for him. So I think he's just a more impressive athlete, and I got to go with Mitrione here.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Reed. Now this brings us to the main event of the evening, a middleweight contest between Tim Boetsch, who is 18-8, and Dan Henderson, who is 30-13. Now, Nick, where did you open this fight, and how has the public shifted things so far?
I opened Boetsch minus 170. The comeback on Henderson is plus 130. And now it's actually a little bit higher for Boetsch. It's minus 190. The comeback is plus 165. Seems like a lot of those lines floating around out there as of late. So there has been two-way action. Henderson line dropped originally when I first opened it at 5 dimes, and then more support coming in on Boetsch has made the line go back up to where it is now at this point, almost 2-1 here for Boetsch. Reed was just talking about TRT and the effect that it's had on fighters. Well, here's another guy right now that Henderson that is obviously going to be off TRT. He's supposed to be clean. He's not, and that could definitely impact him. The guy is 40, almost 45 years old. He's 44, going to be 45 soon. And I think that comes into play here big time. I mean, the guy like Randy Couture, there's only a few guys that have had extreme success in their 40s or, around that age mark. And it's definitely something to be said. Those guys are special, talented fighters. And I think Henderson has had one heck of a career, but I'm just not sure how much he's got left. And that's one hard spot here. Then it's hard to really have a lot of confidence and faith in Henderson. Although he does have that H-bomb that he can end a fight with one punch, obviously. The guy has that wrestling background that we all know and respect well. But at 185, to be honest with you, and obviously this is where this fight is taking place back in middleweight for him, I don't think he's had the success that all of us are expecting. I think 205 light heavyweight was actually a better weight class. His wrestling, his takedown defense, everything was actually a little bit better for him in that weight class. I know he got ragdolled a little bit by Cormier, but that's a different level wrestler. But at 185, he has been beat on the ground. He's been out-wrestled. He's been outperformed. And he just hasn't looked like the same fighter. So again, he's at 185 now. He is off TRT, and he's almost 45 years old. So those are strikes against Henderson right now that you don't really want to – it's hard to make a pick on him because of those. You don't really want to have a lot of faith in the guy. But that being said, this is definitely a winnable fight for him as well, because if you look at Boetsch, Boetsch has been one of these guys that's always been a little bit underrated, a very powerful guy. especially at middleweight. The guy has a little bit of everything. He's got decent knockout power on the feet. He's got decent wrestling in his own right, in most cases, unless he fights an outstanding wrestler. Obviously, with a guy like Munoz, he got ragdolled by Munoz, which was actually surprising at the time how easy Munoz was able to control him, because Boetsch he's so strong. He's not an easy guy to just throw around and do that to. So Boetsch has the complete package. He actually has some submission game to go along with it as well. But that being said, on the other side of it, he has been finished before on the feet. He has been submitted before as well, and he has been grinded out. So Boetsch is a type of fighter that, even though he's looked pretty solid overall throughout his UFC career, and he has a well-rounded MMA game, he still has some vulnerabilities for sure. I mean, even if you look back at his recent fights, the fight against Tavares, he was actually getting beat handily in that fight, and he came back and won in the second round, which you got to give him a lot of credit. He got the knockout punch against Tavares, but he didn't really look all that great in that fight. He got smoked by Rockhold. His win against Dalloway was very questionable. In fact, most of us thought that Dalloway should have got that nod. And then the two fights before that, he did lose to Munoz and he did lose to Philippou. So really, his best two wins in his last few fights have come against Tavares, which he had to come back and he was losing that fight, and then arguably a bad decision against Dalloway. So the guy could be on an extreme losing streak right now. So there's not that much confidence in Boetsch either. I mean, he is a younger fighter. He's been around for a while though, as well. So he's got, I believe, a 10-year age advantage. I mean, he's 10 years younger than Henderson. And I mean, the way he matches up stylistically against Henderson, that's why he is the favorite, because he has enough knockout power on the feet as well to do enough damage to Henderson. Henderson, he's really, throughout his career, he's been known to have a really good chin, but we've seen recently, I mean, he's been getting clipped and been getting rocked and dropped in fights, and that chin seems to be going fast. And again, what could you do? The guy's getting older, and that's what happens at times. So, especially if you've had such a long, successful MMA career like Henderson has. So not much faith in Henderson's chin. Boetsch is such a strong guy that I think he can land and clip and possibly knock Henderson out on the feet. I think the wrestling's going to be interesting here because I think it's going to be fairly close. I mean, as far as technical ability goes, Henderson definitely has the edge, but I mean, this is MMA. So in the cage, I think Boetsch might actually have the ground edge there as well, overall. And he has a submission game edge for sure. I think it's going to be difficult for Boetsch to get a sub over Henderson, but it might not be as difficult to kind of bully Henderson around a little bit here and pin him up against the cage, maybe look for a takedown or two, or do some damage on the feet. So you have to give all the advantages, despite what I just said about Boetsch. I haven't really been impressed. I know a lot of people have more faith than I in Tim Boetsch at this point of his career. I still think that this is a winnable fight for Henderson. This is a fight that Boetsch should win more times than not. As well. So that's why he is again favored, and I am leaning towards Boetsch, but this is another one that you can't really be that confident with. I know Henderson again is off the TRT and all the factors that I said come into play here, but he still has that H-bomb. He's still going to have a little bit of power behind it. And he has the ability to keep fights close. If it hits the scorecards, we could see an ugly, sloppy type of decision here and again, the judges could butcher. So not a confident pick, but I am leaning towards Boetsch because I do think that all the strikes are more against Henderson than they are for Boetsch in this fight, and the way they match up, it should be a better fight for Boetsch. So if all that makes sense, my official lean is Boetsch. I think he could probably beat Dan Henderson in this fight, but again, not a very confident one. And people that are just going crazy laying the juice against Henderson, you got to be cautious in this fight too, because it's a one fight that you definitely have to look at and think that both these guys have shown some weaknesses recently, and you got to not have an extreme amount of confidence in either guy. But my official pick is going to be Boetsch.
And I'm favoring Boetsch as well, but there are some things that are making me a little cautious here. First of all, in terms of height and reach, it's pretty much a wash. So Dan Henderson is going to be about the same size as Tim Boetsch. Boetsch should have the advantage in most areas, especially the striking. Even though he's not a terrific striker, he has a pretty good chin and he has good power, just like Henderson, except he's actually pretty accurate. And being 10 years younger, he's going to be a little bit quicker. That being said, Henderson should have a slight advantage in all the grappling departments, so I expect Henderson to want to close the distance, whether it's in the clinch or shooting in for takedowns. Especially the clinch, just due to his Greco-Roman background. That is an area that he still is very competitive in the UFC. So I would like to think that he could get inside and make this interesting. The other factor that people aren't taking into the equation is the fact that this is a 5-round fight now. So Dan Henderson, in my opinion, has the better conditioning. Tim Boetsch has run out of steam pretty badly in fights before, and those were 3-round fights. This being his first 5-round fight, I think he could be in some really big trouble if this goes past the 3rd round. If he can't put away Dan Henderson, I definitely favor Dan Henderson to make things happen. Even though Henderson actually ran out of steam in that Shogun fight, that's just because he expended so much energy in those first 3 rounds. I think in this fight he's going to be a little bit more composed, and Henderson, if he can weather that early storm, he actually could make a late comeback here. That being said, man, for a guy that used to be known for having such a legendary chin, it has not been very good lately. he was getting rocked in a lot of fights leading up to his UFC return, and then now that he's in the UFC again, he is getting hammered. You just saw it in his last few fights where he's getting knocked out by Vitor, he's getting ragdolled by Daniel Cormier, and then quickly put away by Gegard Mousasi. Now, Tim Boetsch is none of those guys, but he still has a lot of power as well, and if he connects on Dan Henderson's chin at nearly 45 years old, Henderson's probably going to get rocked or dropped and hurt. And Boetsch is a pretty good finisher when he has his opponent on the ropes. You saw it in the Yushin Okami fight. You saw it in the Brad Tavares fight. It just takes one good shot from Boetsch, even if he's losing the fight. So I do think that Boetsch is going to be dangerous at all times, even late when he's gassed. He can take a beating and then come back. So in terms of the pure wrestling, I actually think Boetsch has the better shot. And then that Henderson does have the advantage in the clinch. So it's going to be a matter of where this fight takes place. And I can see Boetsch shooting in and actually getting Dan Henderson on his back, although I'm not certain he'll be able to keep him there, just because Henderson does have that great wrestling background to rely on, and he usually can scramble back to his feet pretty well. Boetsch's biggest weakness, in the UFC at least, has actually been his submission defense. A lot of really strong, powerful grapplers that can drag him to the ground have been able to submit him, but Dan Henderson isn't really the submission type, so I don't think that that's going to be too much of a threat, although who knows, maybe if an H-bomb lands and Boetsch gets hurt, Henderson could jump on a rear naked choke or something. That being said, I just think that there's too many intangibles going in Tim Boetsch's favor, especially the more than 10-year age disadvantage, so I think that Boetsch probably clips him at some point, and the public is, while they're steaming the line a little too hard, they're probably on the right side. So I'm going to favor Tim Boetsch to pull this one out. Now, Reed, what do the numbers tell us for this one?
Well, it's weird. When you line these two guys up, I did not expect to see so many advantages for Tim Boetsch, especially in the stand-up game. So specifically, when these guys go toe-to-toe, all of the striking metrics favor Tim Boetsch over Dan Henderson, and that's, I think, a surprise. Dan Henderson, he's known for being tough and having a lot of power and having the H-bomb, but on paper, at least statistically, it doesn't show up very well. So aside from the fact that there's a 10-year age difference, Tim Boetsch having the youth advantage here, that's, first of all, he's not used to having that youth advantage. He's often fighting some younger guys. So this is going to be a different game for him to begin with Dan Henderson coming off the TRT, also a huge red flag. And then you line up the striking stats and you see Tim Boetsch actually being the more powerful punch-for-punch striker, the more accurate striker. He's got better defense and head avoidance, slightly higher pace, although neither one of these guys is really very aggressive and high-paced. And then most importantly, the biggest stat on the whole page, Tim Boetsch has yet to be knocked down in the UFC. Dan Henderson now has 8 recorded knockdowns from Strikeforce and UFC. On a punch-for-punch basis, his knockdown rating is one of the worst. He's been dropped 8 times. So that is a huge, huge problem for Dan Henderson. You don't get better at being able to take a punch. You can only get worse with time. And I'm one of those people that does think that Dan Henderson should probably retire after this. I mean, he's getting dropped in almost every fight. Granted, he can still win. That's the crazy thing. He does still have his big right hand. He does still have his wrestling to fall back on. When he gets hurt, he instinctively protects himself, and he gets through and weathers the storm and then finds a way to land that one big punch. So even though I don't think he should be fighting, I am not saying he can't win this fight. Because on the ground, the wrestling metrics do favor Dan Henderson. He has been more effective on the mat by a little bit, not by a lot. You would expect him to show up a little bit better with some of these metrics in wrestling. But Tim Boetsch just has not been effective. He does attempt a lot of takedowns, but he just doesn't land a lot. His takedown defense is kind of soft, and generally speaking, he's been controlled on the mat. And so Dan Henderson, if he's smart, will utilize that and just not go toe-to-toe with Tim Boetsch, take him to the ground, and implement the Mark Munoz plan. Just keep working for back control, ground and pound, striking from the side, and just wear him down. The problem is that Dan Henderson isn't always the smartest of fighters. I think he's just too willing to go and trade leather because that's what made him famous. So there's a lot at work here. I clearly favor Tim Boetsch in this fight. I also think he needs to get it done early. He needs to get the early KO. If they start swinging at each other, chances are Tim Boetsch is going to be the one that lands the first punch. And I don't think it's going to take much more than one punch to put Dan Henderson away, or at least put him down and set up a finish. However, if Tim Boetsch doesn't get it done early, if Dan Henderson does start implementing wrestling, then this is a completely different ballgame. The longer this fight goes, the more it favors Dan Henderson because he has pulled that off before. He's stretched fights to 5 rounds before he's gotten through it. Tim Boetsch, he hasn't, this is going to be his first 5-rounder. So, there are factors on both sides of the page here to be aware of. However, there are enough advantages lining up for Tim Boetsch to pick him as a winner, but specifically by knockout, which for him better come early because then all of a sudden this is a different ballgame.
So that'll do it for our full event breakdown for UFC Fight Night 68. Part 2 of the Premium Oddscast featuring our premium bets will be out Friday night following the weigh-in, so stay tuned for that if you're an MMA Oddsbreaker Premium member. If you'd like to become a premium member, just go to the MMAOddsbreaker.com homepage and you can sign up in the top right corner. If we have a free play to give out, make sure to follow at MMAOB Premium on Twitter because that's where we'll post them first. We can also notify you of our free bets via email if you prefer that method. Just send an email to picks@MMAOddsbreaker.com and we'll add you to our free bet mailing list. Also, feel free to like our Premium Oddscast Facebook page. We post articles, show announcements, and plenty of other information there so you can stay up to date on everything from us if you're interested. Special thanks to our sponsors, 5 Dimes and Countermove. Good luck, everyone, and hopefully the betting gods are on your side this weekend.